So we are just presenting this broken film documentary about the illegal Israeli wall in Palestine and the broken promise of international law. We have today present here with us, we have great pleasure, Mr. Stefan Ziegler, the producer and the author of this film documentary. Mr. Ziegler is a seasoned humanitarian professional, has with almost 20 years of experience in humanitarian action, and has worked with the ICRC as a delegate for in Georgia, Abkhazia, Palestine, and the Balkans. Mr. Ziegler worked also for several years with as a head of UN barrier monitoring unit, and finally as a film producer. Currently he works as a trainer. With this short biography, I give the floor to our guest and to develop more on his vision and his more details about Broken. Welcome, Mr. You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you to the Palestine mission here in Geneva for giving us the opportunity, not only for the press conference, obviously, but to show the film to a public which I believe is very much in tune with the content and the ideas the film portrays. Well, first of all, yes, it's true. I worked for almost 9 years in the occupied territories in the West Bank. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, I can speak up a bit.
I don't know how many years for?
In the West Bank?
Yeah.
3 of which I was head of the barrier monitoring unit, a unit looking at the humanitarian impacts, not on individuals, because that is impossible, but on the... Hi, how are you? You haven't missed much yet.
So, in and out.
No worries.
Thank you.
Okay. Monitoring the humanitarian impacts of the wall on the communities bounding those places where the wall cuts into the green line, so to speak, into the Palestinian territory. This unit was paid for by the Swiss Development Corporation. They had a special role to play in 2004, and we'll come back to that, during the ICJ deliberations, but also the General Assembly resolution which declared the wall illegal and its route. Also declared that the wall should be dismantled, and because it is illegal according to international law. This work, 3 years of which, gave me a lot of insights, not just into the impacts of the people on the ground, but also on the misunderstandings of international diplomats, heads of agencies, not just for the UN obviously, but others, people that came in as so-called international NGOs, but with an agenda. It gave me a great insight also to see how many of the military officers from various armies in the world who came to visit, who came for humanitarian diplomacy tours in the West Bank, how little they knew, not just about the actual place and the context, but predominantly about the fact that there was international law applicable, that either by choosing, I would say, or simply by ignorance. They didn't see the role in international law in that context, regardless of politics. I'm saying, okay. It was remarkable that one of the biggest or most frequent questions that was asked during my period there by these people was, what do you do for the Israeli side of the wall?
What do you do for?
For the Israeli side of the wall. Yeah. What do you do for Israel? Well, I suppose most people that have some kind of understanding of international law would shake their hand and say, it's not the occupier that needs to be supported, it's those people that are feeling the impacts of the wall or the conflict. So that kind of left a very strange, aftertaste. After 3 years taking these people around, showing them around, and at one stage, shortly before the end of my project, I got invited to the United Nations in New York, but by the ambassadors or the mission heads to the UN, 36 of which, and we were going through basically very much the same material that I'm telling you now, some more statistics and so on, obviously, and I showed them a map. Each one of them got to be shown an online map, which for reasons not so important here right now, was a film taken of an actual map that was showing impacts with little videos, interviews, tons of information on it. And so to say our work, I think, was important because we produced a map for people to understand not just the wall, but somehow also its impact on peace in the long run. Now, my unit was disbanded on
very bad hearing. Its impact on what?
On peace.
Yeah.
Okay, on international peace, all right? In the long run. Despite the fact that after 3 years, funding was cut, this UNRWA hosted project was retrieved. We had to close door for various reasons. I felt we had left something behind, and that is the importance of international law in a context like this, and also the instruments which are given to it by map making and so on and so forth. So that's probably the biggest retainer that I have from that time. It was a pity that we couldn't spend another 3 years doing this project up so it could be run locally, which was the idea, the handover to the Palestinian Authority, but also to civil society organizations. Okay. The project came to an end in 2013, and when I finished with cleaning up my project, I realized that actually I hadn't really thought about my own I haven't really thought about my own future. And I remember I was at the airport in Tel Aviv, flying back to Geneva, and I said to myself, so what do I do now that this project is over and I'm basically, out of a job? And I said there were two things. I can either go back to working with somebody like the UN, with UNDP or somebody, and continue my career as a humanitarian, or, and that seemed immediately much more interesting to me, is do something to share that knowledge in one way or another with a broad public. Since I believed, in terms of wall monitoring, I'm saying probably was the most knowledgeable person. And not only that, but one of the only ones. So with me, a lot of this learning would have gone out the door, and I felt, ethically speaking, I couldn't do this. So basically I decided, what can you do as an individual with no job to try and keep that momentum alive? So that's it. It took 4 years for various reasons. Very few people finance a project that has a Palestine in its title. I think you probably know more about that. So it took 4 years because it was so difficult to get finance. In the end, I just paid for it myself, and that's it. So buried that idea of getting money for this project from multiple sources. We got on with it. We filmed. We started filming. We set up the production company here in Geneva. We wanted to have a kind of a neutral face on where we are and where we operate from and who the person is that produces this film. But there you go. This is how we came up to live in Geneva. Now, the making of the documentary, as I said, it took about 4 years. The gentleman who was commissioned to film this piece of work or art is called Mohammed Al-Attar, who's previously filmed a documentary in 2005, which is called The Iron Wall, where he looked at the intricate relationship between the illegal settlements and the wall going around them and so on. Okay, a very strong piece of film history, and I felt he was the right person to do the same again, but taking a much more distant look at it. It was no longer, I said, about the pictures alone. This was about debates from people who knew what international law's role is in that particular context. So, as you can see also on the website, we got to interview 9 people, mainly jurists, 3 of whom very well-known judges from the International Court of Justice in The Hague, and the former Prime Minister of Jordan, for example. We have the architect of the wall, the so-called architect of the wall, Danny Tirza. He also served to describe the Israeli side of why the wall was put up and the whole history and discourse behind it. We were never quite sure how we got him as an interview partner, but we were extremely happy to see that side and get a representation from the Israeli state, if you wish, in that. The other person who really boosted our confidence was Dr. Bergenthal, or Professor Bergenthal. He was the only dissenting judge in the 2004 wall case in The Hague, who said, no, I don't agree with this the judgment or the opinion of my colleagues, and explains why in the film takes a position that is, I would say, quite unique. He's seen obviously as a person who, because of his religion and because he was American, could be seen as somebody turning it down for political reason, which he contests entirely. I think one of the good moments about having him on that film is that he's actually refused to give interviews about this wall case forever. And we got the first exclusive interview with the one gentleman who I think probably went through a lot of, emotions also, being in this, and giving an interview to a Palestinian-American filmmaker. We felt, in a way, very privileged, but it also lends a lot of credibility to the film, obviously. So these are the kind of people that we had, that we felt, with whom we can really work well with. But we had no idea we could actually get them to come into into this whole project and process. The film is 52 minutes long. We chose 52 minutes. We felt if it's a cinema-length film of 90 minutes, for this topic, it's too long. Or too short in any case, because it is so intricate. So we decided, let's do it for TV length and give it enough kick for people to really think about what international law's role is in all of this. Yes, as I said, we traveled to America, in the Middle East. We filmed on the wall. We filmed, Mohammed Al-Attar filmed inside the turnstiles these modern checkpoints leading the workers to go to Israel to work and to hospitals and whatever the case may be. These are exclusive pictures. Nobody has filmed inside those turnstiles. Obviously, it was filmed undercover and as you would do, and I think journalists know that more than ourselves. But so we have exclusive pictures of this, what the wall does in one instance. We don't go into all of the different types of impacts on the double burden on women, etc., etc. We could have spent days talking about these impacts, obviously. So we took the very visual transfer of people through these checkpoints, which can take hours and hours, both ways, to and from work, and so that's the film, together with 9 very well positioned people to talk about international law and how they came up with the advisory opinion of 2004, predominantly based on human rights law, but certainly on international humanitarian law. Okay, so you can see the connection between me being a humanitarian and where we based all of this on. Okay. Okay, that's a little bit to the film. I'm very happy to answer your questions in a moment, but one thing I would like to leave with you, which is a really big concern of mine. At the outset of this film, I said, I want to create something that is of educational use. All right? We're now talking to even UN agencies to see how could we use this film as an illustration of international law in an extreme case to bring it to people not only inside the agencies, UN or other, but also to the outside. And I remember talking to somebody in the Human Rights Organization, and I said, maybe we made a mistake to try and bring international law through this really, really complex example, and they were absolutely adamant. If it works for the most difficult case that we have in this kind of sense, then it should work for others that are less difficult. And so we're in the negotiations of seeing how our film could be made available to a plethora of different interests, not just institutions here and about, but also to universities where the film doesn't want to be screened. The film wants to be communicated. We want this film to be debated. This is where you bring out the learning more than in any other sense, we believe. And we have just recently concluded a contract with a German distributor who is a distributor for film material for educational, predominantly for the university level, to libraries and so on and so forth. So we take heart that people are realizing that there is more to this film than simply a film, okay, in that sense. So this is the kind of main points that I wanted to get across to you. Just to say that tomorrow we will be screening the film in the cinema here at 3 o'clock. And you will see for yourself if you have the chance to come, or hopefully.
Already know that.
I can see that. Very good. You know, this is great. I hope we didn't waste your paper, huh? So this is where we're going to be. Open to debate. We are very lucky to have the special rapporteur for the human rights in the OPT present, who's right now talking, yes, in the chamber next door, Mr. Michael Link. And we hope that we'll get ever closer to being able to get this out as something that is of value. As one person in OHCHR said, this film, if it is communicated as an educational tool, will serve international law in itself, because it brings it from an elite group of people, it can get it out to a wider world where international law needs to be understood in a world that we see and witness these days.